This is what you're going to be working on today for today's class for distributive property. And then the other part is going to be problems like this. So you're going to work on solving an equation where you have distributive property on both sides. You're also going to be combining like terms on both sides and then solving it. So this is a multi-step equation. So I'm going to show you these two examples here, and you're going to try to as well. And in the first page, I'm going to go over 4 examples where in 2 of the examples, you're going to be distributing a negative number. So I'm going to show you a strategy for that. And then you're going to go down here and try it yourself as well. So let's look at these problems with the distributive property. So I want you to take notes on these 4 examples. And after that, you're going to try these next 4 problems here. And what I recommend on your paper is just to number these out, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Similarly, 1, 2, 3, 4 down here. So you're not going to have many issues when you're distributing a positive number, because when you're doing distributive property, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to multiply each of these terms on the inside by 5. So you can see this is what it looks like. 5 times u plus, so bring the plus sign now, 5 times 6. So each of these terms are multiplied by 5, so I showed that work right there. And remember, this u is really just a 1u, so this will become 5u when you multiply these together. And 5 times 6 is 30. This is not an equation. You can't solve it. So we're done right here, 5u plus 30. Notice this has u, this does not have u, so I cannot add these together. So we just leave that expression that way. Example number 2, you can see we were distributing a negative. And you can see up here that I recommend rewriting the parentheses as addition. So any of these that have a minus in here, I recommend rewriting it as addition. So I'll show you in this example here. And as a side note, when you're subtracting 2 numbers, so like a and b, any numbers, when you're subtracting them, I could rewrite it as addition by just putting a plus negative b. So you can see here, that's what I did here. 6y minus 1, I rewrote it as 6y plus negative 1. So essentially it becomes plus negative plus negative. And then you can see here, in distributive property, we multiply these together, negative 2 times 6y, which I showed here. And then you can do negative 2 times negative 1, which I did here as well. So you can see I just brought the plus sign down, negative 2 times negative 1. And again, if you mess up with these, this is probably the area you're going to mess up on. So if you get it wrong, make sure you check your signs. And after multiplying this out, negative 2 times 6y is negative 12y plus, and then negative 2 times negative 1 is positive 2. So my final answer, negative 12y plus 2. So in this example, we have subtraction in here, and then I'm distributing a negative. So I recommend rewriting this as addition. So you can see that's the first thing I did. I rewrote minus 7 is the same thing as plus negative 7. And now you can see here, distributive property, I multiplied these 2 together, negative 2 times 7u, which I showed here. Bring down my plus sign. Then negative 2 times negative 7, which I did here. And again, by writing as addition, it really stands out that I'm distributing a negative, so you can see that here. So it's a little bit less confusing. And now I just simplify, so when I multiply that out, I get negative 14u plus, and when I multiply that out, I get positive 14, and that's my final answer. And then in this next example, we're distributing positive 3. So what I recommend, again, in this case, if you're distributing a positive, you don't really have to worry about the signs. So multiply 3 times 3y in the first step. Bring down my minus sign, and then 3 times 1 is the next step. So I'll get 9y minus 3. So looking back, you can see that I rewrote the ones as addition. If I'm distributing a negative, I recommend rewriting as addition. This was I'm distributing a negative, so I rewrote it as addition. This one was subtraction, but since I'm not distributing a negative number, I just simply bring that minus sign down and multiply 3 times 1. So my final answer here was 9y minus 3. So again, if you mess up on these problems, be very, very careful. Work slowly when you're working on distributing a negative number and if you're dealing with subtraction. So now your job is to apply what you learned there into these 4 problems. Now in this next section, I wrote out 5 steps that I recommend you use when you're solving a multi-step equation like this or this one. So I'm going to walk you through both of these examples, and then you're going to try these 2 as well. So I'm going to walk you through each of these steps so you can see how to apply it to a problem like this. So step number 1 says to use a distributive property. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. And keep in mind that sometimes if there is nothing to distribute, then you could skip that step and go to step 2. But since I do have distributive property here, and I could distribute over here as well, then that means I'm going to do step 1. So I'm going to do that first step. Now in the first step, I just want to point something out that I distributed the 4 here, 4 times 1u, 4 times 6, and I brought down my minus u. Here, I noticed that this was I'm distributing a negative, and this is minus. So before I distributed, I actually just rewrote this as addition. So that became plus negative 7. So in my next step, I'm going to actually distribute that part. But in here, I can simplify it in the next step. So now you can see here, I simplified 4 times 1u is 4u, 4 times 6, 24. Minus u, that's the same thing as minus 1u. So if you want to put the 1, you can. So I simplified the left side. Then over here, as I mentioned before, I rewrote it as addition, so that became plus negative. And now I distributed negative 2 times positive 7u, bring down my plus sign, negative 2 times negative 7, which I did here. And then the plus 7u, I brought that down to the next step. So now I'm going to simplify this side. So you can see here, I just rewrote the left side, and I multiplied this out. Negative 2 times 7 is negative 14. And then negative times negative, you get positive 14 here. And then I brought down my 7u. So now my next step, so again, that's step 1. So I did step 1. Step 2 is to combine like terms on the same side. So I'm going to do that. So my like terms here are 4u and 1u. I'm going to combine those here. And on this side, I'm going to combine negative 14u and 7u. So after combining like terms and simplifying, you can see here 4u minus 1u is 3u. Bring down my plus 24. Here I have negative 14u plus 7u, which is negative 7u. And then I brought down my plus 14. So step 2, combine like terms on the same side is all set. Step 3 is to eliminate the lower value variable using either addition or subtraction property. So look at my variables. I still have variables on both sides. And I just asked myself which one is lower in value. This is a positive 3. This is a negative 7. This is lower in value, so I'm going to eliminate that. And to eliminate the 7 negatives, I'm going to put 7 positives. So always do the opposite. So in this case, I'm going to add 7u. And if I add 7u to this side, I have to add 7u to this side as well. And this is called addition property of equality. And then now, by simplifying, when you combine these, you get 10u plus 24 equals, when you combine this, that's a 0 pair. And then plus 14, I bring that down, so plus is positive, so I just put positive 14 there. And now, step 3 is all set. So that means I'm going to step 4, eliminate the constant that's on the same side of the variable. So I'm solving for u. So again, notice here we have u on both sides. Now I have u on one side. So I'm going to eliminate the 24 that's on the same side as this variable that I'm solving for. This is called the constant because there's no variable. So that's what it means by eliminating the constant on the same side of the variable. So let's get rid of the 24 positives by doing the opposite, 24 negatives. So you can see here, if I take away 24 on one side, I got to do the same thing on the other side to balance the equation. When I simplify, these are 0 pair right here. Bring down my 10u. 14 minus 24 is negative 10. So again, I highly stress is to make sure pay attention to your signs if you're using a calculator, especially type it in correctly as you see it. 14 minus 24. A lot of times I see students put 24 minus 14. You can't switch the order when you're subtracting. Make sure you put it the top one first minus the second one. So I'm just bringing this step over here. 10u equals negative 10. So the last step, so we did eliminate the constant. The last step is either using multiplication or division property to solve for the variable. So to get 10u into 1u, I got to use division property by dividing by 10, because 10 divided by 10 will give me my 1u. If I divide one side by 10, got to divide the other side by 10 as well. And this becomes negative 1, which is my solution for the equation. All right, and here's our second example. We're going to apply all 5 steps again to this one here. And again, take your time when you're doing these. That's why I only put a couple of examples to work on, because they do take a lot of steps involved. So make sure you take your time doing these. Don't rush through it. And again, pay very close attention to the negatives. So step 1 is to use the distributive property. And again, before I apply that step is if you do have to distribute a negative, like in this case here, I would recommend rewriting it as addition first. And you could actually just do it right here on the paper. So if I just go here and put plus, if I put plus a negative, you could just do that in the first step. So plus negative is rewritten as addition, and now I could go ahead and apply the distributive property right here and right here. So again, distributive properties first. 3 times 3y, I did that. 3 times 1, I did that. And I just brought down my minus sign. Here I'm distributing a negative, so I rewrote it as addition. Negative 2 times 6y, I wrote that down. Negative 2 times negative 1, wrote that down. This, I just brought it down to the next step, so plus 7y plus 12. So again, the only thing I did was distributive property in step 1. And after the distributive property, which we just did, you're going to combine like terms on the same side. So look for like terms on this side as well as this time. But again, before I do that, let me just simplify this first. So you can see here, I multiplied these out, got 9y, multiply this, got 3, negative 2 times 6, negative 12, and negative 2 times negative 1, positive 2. So again, as you're simplifying, make sure you pay close attention to those negatives, and then write down the rest. So now I can actually simplify by combining the like terms that are on the same side. So on this side, I can see I have a 3 and 3. These are both constants, meaning they don't have a variable. So I can combine the 3 and the minus 3. So 3 minus 3 is 0. So that's actually a 0 pair. And I have positive 9y left. So that's my left side simplified. And then on the right side, I can see here I have a negative 12y and a positive 7y. When you combine that, you're going to get negative 5y. And I have two constants left over, positive 2 plus 12, which is going to give me positive 14. So I'll put plus 14 there. So we just did step 2, combining like terms on the same side. Now I'm going to eliminate the lower value variable. So you can see here we're left with y's on both sides of the equation. So I look at which one is lower in value. This positive 9, negative 5. That's lower in value, so I'm going to eliminate that one by introducing 5 positives, the opposite. Make sure you write down your variables. So if I add 5y here, I have to do the same thing over here to balance the equation. And now I'm just going to simplify both sides. And you can see here I get 9 and 5 plus 5y is 14y. This is a 0 pair here, and 14 positives bring that down. And then the last step, you can see here, is to use the multiplication or division property to solve for a variable. All right, so we're down to the last step, which is just to, in this case, divide by 14, because when I divide it by 14, I get 1y. And if I divide this by 14, I'll do the same on the other side to balance the equation. And my answer here is positive 1. So y equals 1 is the solution to that equation. So you're going to take what you learned in these two examples and apply it to these two, and that'll be the classwork for today.